The grid is set for the 63rd running of the Rolex 24 at Daytona, as we now know where each car will line up on the grid for this classic North American endurance race. In the qualification sessions, we saw many things, including first-time pole sitters in two major categories. So in this video, I'll break down what happened during qualifying for the upcoming 2025 Rolex 24 at Daytona within the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. Qualifying for the race took place on Thursday, January 23rd, just 2 days before green flags will be waved at the Daytona International Speedway. For this qualifying report, I'll start off by talking about the GTD session, and move up chronologically until we get to the main flagship IMSA class of GTP. For the first time in IMSA history, the GTD class cars had their own qualifying session. As before, the two GT categories shared just one session. 21 cars would compete for the GTD pole in qualifying, but unfortunately the 22nd and only entry that didn't compete was the 023 Triarsi Competizione Ferrari 296, which wouldn't go on track. However, the second Triarsi Ferrari with Le Mans winner James Calado behind the wheel was performing well, and he went fastest overall with around 9 minutes in, with a 1 minute 47.476. Soon afterwards though, it became apparent that Lamborghini's pace from the roar before the 24 was genuine, as both teams of Wayne Tilla Racing and Forte Racing showed strong pace in GTD, with their drivers behind the wheel. Towards the end of the session, it mainly became a three-way battle between Lamborghini, Mercedes, and Porsche cars for pole. With 6 minutes to go, Trent Hindman went fastest overall in the number 45 Lamborghini, with Forte Racing following in second with Frank Pereira behind the wheel. Lamborghini's Huracan GT3 Evo 2s definitely looked strong, but Hindman's lap eventually would be beaten with just over 3 minutes to go by Elliott Skier aboard the number 120 Wright Porsche, and after that no one would beat the American driver's time. This therefore meant that Wright Motorsport would take pole in GTD at Daytona, with Elliott Skier's lap of a 1 minute 46.634, putting the 120 Porsche on pole by just 2/100ths of a second to last year's winners of Windward Racing with their number 57 Mercedes in second. And those entries were followed by Trent Hindman's number 45 WTR Lamborghini in third, the number 32 Korkhoff Mercedes in fourth, and the number 12 Vasser Sullivan Lexus driven by Parker Thompson completing the top 5. For the next session of GTD Pro, all 15 entries would compete. Tommy Milner's time of a 1 minute 52.904 in the number 4 Pratt Miller Motorsports Corvette put him on provisional pole in the very early stages of qualifying. But the lap was inevitably beaten by Tomas Preining in the number 20 Proton Competition Porsche, who set a nearly 2-second faster time. Meanwhile, it wasn't turning out to be a good session for the number 14 Vasser Sullivan Lexus or the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW, as those cars were struggling to put in laps that would put them into the top 10, which was definitely not a place that either teams were familiar with. Meanwhile though, Paul Miller Racing's second car, the number 48 BMW, which is new to the team, was having a really good session, with driver Dan Harper going on provisional pole by just 0.3 to Vervish in the Ford. With Harper's lap I just mentioned allowing him to maintain first place in GTD Pro, Andrea Caldarelli soon went second in the number 9 Pfaff Lamborghini, with a lap time of a 1 minute 46.2, and following the Huracan would be the number 3 Pratt Miller Corvette, which soon crossed the line to post the third fastest time with Alexander Sims behind the wheel, although no one could beat Dan Harper's lap in the BMW thus far. But then, with just under 5 minutes to go, Vervish retook first place in the number 65 Multimatic Ford, and became the first driver to dip into the 145s, and about a minute later, his teammate Mike Rockenfeller went even faster in the number 64 Ford Mustang, and after that, no one could beat the Mustang entry's times, which therefore gave Ford and Multimatic Motorsports a front row lockout in qualifying at Daytona, with Mike Rockenfeller grabbing his first IMSA pole since 2006, when he qualified on pole position at Homestead in the number 23 Alex Job Racing Daytona prototype. Now, lining up on the second row behind the two factory Fords are going to be the number 48 BMW from Paul Miller Racing and the number 3 Pratt Miller Corvette, with Andrea Caldarelli's lap putting the number 9 Pfaff Motorsports Lamborghini in 5th on the grid. Moving on to the prototype field, and first up was the LMP2 qualifying session. And keep in mind that only bronze-rated drivers would be allowed to qualify their ORCA entries. The session began with George Kurtz being one of the first drivers to go fastest in the 04 CrowdStrike Racing by APR entry, but his time was soon beaten by Chris Cumming in the number 73 Pratt Miller LMP2, which, keep in mind, is a brand new entry to the P2 category. Like always, the P2 field was proving to be extremely competitive, and with 7 minutes to go, the gap from 1st to 7th was just around 7/10. AO Racing founder PJ Hyatt was the first driver to dip into the 139s, as he went fastest in the number 99 Spike entry. But soon, that lap was beaten by Stephen Thomas in the number 11 TDS racing car, and soon after, a familiar name returned to the top, and that was Ben Keating, who took pole last year at Daytona as well. But unfortunately, it wouldn't be a 6th LMP2 pole in a row for the Texan racer, as number 22 United Autosports driver Daniel Goldberg went on provisional pole with a 1 minute 38.690, although there was a bit of drama at the end of the session, as PJ Hyatt spun around in the number 99 AO Racing entry at turn 1, which unfortunately meant that Spike would lose 3rd place. The top 5 in the LMP2 qualifying session would therefore look like this. Daniel Goldberg's lap would allow the number 22 United Autosports car to start on pole position, followed by the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry thanks to Ben Keating, while the 2nd United Autosports car, which was the number 2 entry, would start 3rd, which would conclude a very successful day for United Autosports. Meanwhile, that new number 73 Pratt Miller entry had a strong debut qualifying session, with Chris Cumming putting the car in 4th, while the number 11 TDS Racing LMP2 completed the top 5. Moving on to the final session, which was arguably the most important, and that was the GTP qualifying event, which of course would be where the overall pole would be decided. Although it's worth pointing out that the session would unfortunately not feature the number 5 Mustang Sampling Proton Competition Porsche for the 2nd year in a row, as the car had a broken suspension following an incident involving Tristan Vautier during an earlier practice session. Honestly, we didn't see many competitive times in the beginning of qualifying, because the session was red flagged early on, following a technical issue for the number 25 BMW, which stopped on track with Sheldon van der Linde behind the wheel. Up until this point, things were going so well for BMW, and to have this happen was super unfortunate. But then again, remember that the upcoming event is 24 hours in length, so it's possible that the number 25 BMW can still win this race. Once the BMW was towed back to the pits, the cars were allowed to return to the track for the final minutes of qualifying to determine the overall pole. With a minute left on the clock, Felipe Nasr was placed on provisional pole in the number 7 Porsche Penske 963, in what was turning out to be a very intense end to the GTP qualifying, as multiple cars could take pole. Tom Blomqvist soon went to the top in the number 60 Meyershank Racing Acura, with minutes to spare on the clock. But the British-born, New Zealand-raised racer would need to set a faster lap time to counter the other quick laps coming from more GTP entries. But a dramatic moment happened involving Blomqvist's Acura and Mirko Bortolotti's number 63 Lamborghini, which arguably compromised the number 60 Acura's lap. Meanwhile, Dries Vanthoor for BMW M Team RLL and Jean-Marie Bruni for JDC Miller Motorsports were both improving with faster sectors, and when Vanthoor crossed the line for his final attempt at pole, he set a 1 minute 33.895, which put him on pole in the number 24 BMW. This lap allowed BMW to secure their first ever pole position in the modern IMSA GTP era. And considering where they were just 2 years ago at Daytona, this is a major accomplishment and shows how far BMW and Team RLL have come, and I'm hoping that they keep this performance going heading into the race. Acura were able to achieve second in qualifying, but not with that number 60 car. This time it was the number 93 Acura, driven by new MSR driver Nicky Lowley, that took that position. And that car was followed by the number 7 Porsche Penske in third, the number 31 Whelen Cadillac from Action Express Racing in fourth, and finally the number 85 JDC Miller Porsche completed the top 5. So that completes my qualifying report on what happened during each of the 4 sessions, as we prepare for the Rolex 24 at Daytona. With the 61 cars now ready to take to the track for this epic endurance race, I want to know what you thought about the qualifying sessions, and are you excited for the Rolex 24 that's set to take place this weekend? Well, as always, make sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like endurance racing, definitely subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I'm releasing videos on a weekly basis regarding the WEC, IMSA, Intercontinental GT, and much more. To watch more content now, check out these suggested videos I've put on screen. For now though, that's all from me. Thanks for watching.